Hey, it's Robert with Hush Performance. Thank you for following the channel. This video you're about to watch was recorded about 2 years ago, and many of you have actually purchased the newest version of our radiator shroud. And I wasn't able to upload this, but I'm hoping that we'll have like a whole generational video series on how we created the EF Scirocco Radiator mount along with the radiator shroud. I do have some other videos that we're working on that were recorded years ago that will help follow up and make you understand. So many of you have purchased this stuff and many of you are actually using this stuff currently, and those have been on the fence. They can understand why we made what we did, or any of those in the future that are looking for a radiator mount solution. Remember, this radiator can work in essentially any configuration, whether the radiator hoses need to be on the right side or the left side. Check it out. Thank you again. Hey, it's Robert with Hush Performance, and welcome to another edition of How to Swap. We are back working on our all-wheel drive CRX. Some things have changed, and it's not going to be all-wheel drive out of my shop. However, there are some parts that we're going to finish up that can still be relative to your all-wheel drive conversion. We're going to cover the radiator setup here. What you're seeing there is a Scirocco radiator out of the 1981 to 1991 Volkswagen Scirocco. It was a popular radiator that many of the K-Series swap guys were using because of its dual pass design. What I believe is mostly the cost. If you're going to be using this radiator, you would have to develop your own type of mounting system. What people like a lot about it is that it fits just inside the core support here. And if you watched our Vtec Academy series, Budget EF, we use the same type of radiator, and we had to modify the core support quite a bit. What you're looking at is a part that we had developed right here in the shop, because what I wanted to do was give you guys the opportunity of have something bolt on. Now, there's still some modification that you do have to do to the chassis, but it's going to come with a comprehensive instruction manual. The end result is going to be something that looks purpose-built. And this is the dual pass that we were referencing. So the operator hose is going to fit in here and then flow its way through to the other end tank and then flow its way back. If you look at the K-Series, we have the upper water neck up here, and then we'll have the lower radiator neck here. And in the Vtec Academy Budget EF, there are radiator hoses that we found that worked great, and I'll list those there down in the description for you as well. The modifications have already been done on this chassis. I actually built this whole kit to this chassis. It wasn't damaged at all. This whole core support was in tip-top shape. If we'll look closely here, this core support is much thicker than what you see here. And so what we're doing is we're trimming it back a bit so that we have something to work with. And then this bracket actually straddles over what's left of here. And that creates us a mount for the radiator. Our kit's going to include some post mounts. You'll end up having to weld on yourself. There might be a time where we'll have these radiators available that are already pre-welded for you. But what that does is give you something that you'll be able to mount it to, and it's soft mount with some decent. Now, depending on the swap that you have, there may or may not be some extra modifications that you're going to need to do to this radiator. In our case, we are going to have to. This right here, I believe, is a shroud mount. Well, this actually interferes with our alternator bracket. This right here was an alternator relocator from K-Tuned. It moves the alternator from its original location down to where the AC compressor was. And the reason that we do that with the CRX is because the headlight bucket generally is in our way. So we're gonna have to trim this up a little bit. I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be basically, I'm gonna come in here with an air saw and then smooth it out just enough to where it's going to clear our alternator. But remember that your engine is going to rock back and forth, so just make sure that you have enough room. Oh, that's nice. Those lower grommets are a tight fit. As I was pushing down on the radiator, I was kind of holding the grommet in place. I sized the weld-on posts just slightly bigger so that it would stretch the grommet out to help hold it into the bracket that we designed here. And if you notice that it's slotted, so that'll allow you to slot one way to move this one way or the other if we're off center or maybe your car was tweaked just a little bit. So now in here we have plenty of clearance for our alternator. the way that it was before, it almost touched and it just wouldn't let us get in there. But with it removed there, we got plenty of clearance. Now we're gonna get into the upper mounts, and I think this is like the nicest part of this kit. This right here is what the upper post mount brackets look like. They're slotted as well, but sized just for the same size grommet that we're gonna have down here on the bottom. So that makes things easier in the future. Again, if you lose something like this, these are shelf items that are easily accessible. But there, it's almost in there. There we go. And so here you can see how I can slide from left to right based on our needs. It's going to fit the radiator just underneath the factory T-bar. These posts on the radiator are the factory ones, and the configuration of the Scirocco would normally be flipped to 180. But in this scenario, we're doing it to where the outlets are going to be on the driver's side. At our upper mount, we're going to hold that grommet to keep it from being pushed through. There it is. And it's going to align with some holes that are already here from the OEM. And what this did and held was the OEM condenser for the AC compressor. And since we're not using AC anymore, then we get to use this. And so what I'm trying to show you is how easily it aligns. And there it is. And hopefully you can see through the hole. All the hardware that you're going to need for this install is going to be included in the kit. Now that the hardware is in place, this thing is solid. But that's nice, purpose built. Like someone's going to like that. And so we'll look at our clearances here. We got some space in there, okay? And then we'll look at our upper mounts here, how those fit. So now is the million-dollar question: does it fit with the T-bar? So we got a tuck radiator. Okay, now granted there isn't a fan on this yet. Hey, when we last left off, we were talking about what type of shroud we're going to do or what kind of fan we're going to work with. Well, we're going to start on it now, and so I'm still trying to debate on what fan I should use, or maybe make like 2 different style shrouds that one could possibly get, or maybe even 3 or 4. As I'm thinking about it right now, I want to use a SPAL fan, 1200 CFM or more. I believe those are like 9 or 8 inches, I believe is what they're called. Maybe the total diameter is going to be like 12. But I think most people are using like full size slim fans, or they're going to want to, or they're going to want to try to get some less expensive ones. And so maybe I can make a shroud that will hold 1 and 2, like 1, and then another one that will hold 2 SPAL fans, full size, big, thick, gnarly motors, and then 1 that will hold 1, and then 2 for the smaller slim fans that are actually a little bit wider. We could possibly work at that, but what I'm going to do now, so as we're still trying to figure it out, what I'm going to do now is pull this out, and there are some points right there that we're going to work with. There's one here, and there's one above that water neck right there that you can't quite see. So there's a couple of them that we're going to try to grab. I already designed one, I already cut one, and now that I know that what I made here is going to work for us, then I'm going to redesign it again. So I'm slightly off on my holes here, and I'm going to show you how that works. These registers right here are already there. They're on the Scirocco radiator. I have never had an actual OEM radiator, so I don't really know what they look like. I'm assuming that this is how they're constructed for the OEM fans here. There's a lot of manufacturers who make this radiator, and these bosses here could be close and or similar in terms of like their location on the end tanks here, but because there's so many different manufacturers, these could be slightly off. And so if we build this shroud specific to this one or this particular brand, then it may not fit others perfectly. So what I'm implying is these holes somewhat align on this one, and I do have to make some adjustments, but I'm gonna slot these holes too so that other radiators could possibly fit this as well. I did make just one fan. I believe I may explain before that I'm going to do one fan on this particular setup, but I can always set it up for two fans, one fan over here. But check this out, this could also flip around too if you needed it. So what I wanted to show you is how you can make that on this. With something like this, it's not incredibly difficult to get these measurements, and it's not going to be like this with everything that you're going to try to make that's custom. But you'll simply just hit these bosses right here, and you're going to put your measuring tool in the end of the boss, and then just going to measure. Once you have this measurement from here to here, to get to center point, you're going to take your other tool here. This is the measurement that we have on here, and then what you're going to do is subtract the number that you have of the total diameter from the total length. And what that's going to do is get you to the center point of those bosses. This is something that Brian at Hossport had shown me. And so what Brian told me about designing, you design with intent is what he would call it. And in this case, we're going to start with the holes. And I believe that's how he starts when he makes a bracket. Off the table, we got it aligned with our extrusions, and it looks like we're pretty much aligned. Like I said, I was off about a 1/16 of an inch. I moved it 1/16 of an inch like in either direction, actually half of that, so it was like 0.03 in each direction and left to right, here and here, and it's slotted too, so you can see how there's going to be movement inside there. And then there's enough space there for a bolt to get through. That's pretty cool. I like it. And then we did take that material off of the edge here. So now we're going to fold this in our press brake right there. After a couple of tries, we're getting down pretty good, man. That's really nice. And this is the dual fan option that I was talking about. So while I was making adjustments as far as the flashing goes here, I decided to go ahead and draw the secondary fan here. And I think when I started this off, I was talking about how I don't really have a fan of choice yet. These are just kind of generic holes, and I can always fix that in the program. But that's set up so that you can get an idea. Simultaneously, while I'm designing this, I'm also posting on Instagram so that guys that are looking to get this stuff right now, before this video comes out, that basically it's just promotion and marketing, and so they can see what's going on. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw this up anyway, because we're gonna need it in the video, but I still don't have a fan yet. So I guess basically it's just some ideas. Maybe I can get some pre-sales out of this before this video comes out. Radiator's installed. I like how it's coming out. I just really like the way that it fits, man, and like how solid it is. But that's what we got right here, man, with this shroud. It was about flush with the T-bar, and then now we're added, let's just say, an extra inch here for the shroud. But we're gonna need all that space because the bolts that we're gonna use for the fan, we wanna make sure that they're clear and free of the radiator fins. If you weren't familiar, you could see how close the extrusion on the radiator was to the alternator, and that's going to be relative to whether you have a K24 or a K20, or if you're using one of these relocation kits already, or what kind of radiator you're using. You know, you may have to trim that extrusion off or fold that tab down. You can see that it looks like the shroud is actually touching the alternator right now, and with the engine moving, you know, back and forth, it's definitely going to hit. So, you got to remember, this radiator isn't just set up, isn't just going to be used with the K-swap. This can be used with the stock D series, H series, whatever motor that you want to fit in here.
assuming this is going to work for you. It could work with anything. So, you know, there's might be some modifications that you're going to need to do over there to get it to fit. But so we're going to be working out what kind of fans we're going to be using in here. But when we get there, we'll add that on. Now comes a key question that even I had to ask, is because when this is all said and done, you're going to have several $100s into this setup. You got the mount kit, you have the shroud, you have the fans, you have the radiator itself, you're going to have the upper coolant neck that we're still working on, which will be on the other half of this. You're going to have the radiator hoses. We have a ton of money in this, so why not buy a radiator from the other manufacturers that are out there? Well, there's not really a radiator that's specifically made for the EF. They're more universal fits. And there's a guy that I follow on Instagram. He just makes some awesome radiator stuff with billet end tanks. Really nice stuff, which if he made them, and if you're doing billet intakes, essentially the only limitation that you're going to have is what core you can find. And assuming that you could do the billet intakes, you can make it fit the EF and make it EF specific. However, this is how I was able to answer that question. Initially, it's going to be the cost of one of those custom-made radiators, and if it's billet intakes, then in theory that could be a radiator that is readily available, so that would be a production item. But you'll have the same costs in both, except if you were to ever damage this radiator, the Scirocco, you poke a hole in it or you needed to make some other modifications, this radiator is cheap. So the initial setup is expensive with the mount kits and the shroud, the fans, but if you damage the radiator, that radiator is 150 bucks. You could swap that out all of the time without having to either A, hope to find somebody to repair that super expensive radiator that you got from somewhere else, or have to replace it altogether, and that would really bite, because then you're spending 500 bucks or more every single time, opposed to just replacing the inexpensive radiator here. So I guess there's going to be added benefits to either one. With this setup, there is some installation involved in this as far as labor goes. There's a lot of time, and you want to take your time putting this on so to make it really nice. But then after that, the car's set up. So those are just some maybe pros and cons you want to weigh for yourself. It's been a few days. Our fans showed up. We got two different styles of fans. We're getting these from Mishimoto. One of them is the slim fan, which is a 2.73 right here, and it's going to really fit our application right in here. Super slim. However, because of its size and the type of fan that it is and motor, then at best we're getting 950 CFM. But this bad boy, holy smokes, it is gnarly. The motor on here weighs big time. So I'm going to weigh both of these so that you can, just so you can understand like what I'm trying to describe here. Our scale's zeroed out. Let's see what we get. Not bad. Alright guys, be prepared. This thing is shockingly heavy. Wow, I was actually expecting it to be a little bit heavier than that, but it might just be that I've never felt a 5-pound fan. Now let's compare what these guys at least sound like, or feel how much air they're pushing. Somewhere. Alright, now it's the boss. Oh, dang! Jerked it out of my hand. I gotta be careful. I had to hold it. I don't want my fingers to get caught in there. Whoa, okay. Whoa! Big difference, guys. As we mentioned before, it's a dual pass design, and it's essentially universal in the sense that you could use this for virtually anything that this thing will fit in, which means you can flip this thing 180 degrees and then use it on another setup. There isn't a water neck anywhere on there. The water neck would be attached to your cylinder head, so again, that's another universal factor. There is an overflow, but we weld our overflows closed, allowing us to use an overflow that's attached to our water neck, and that essentially makes it as universal as it can get. So because this is a popular radiator, we stock these along with the radiator shrouds that we have. The radiator shrouds allows us to bolt on the largest fan that we can without having to attach it using those zip tie styles that go through the core, which generally ruin the core and in some cases actually break the core open and cause a leak.